Hey there, I'm estate planning attorney Paul Rabelais, and we're going to have some fun in this video because in this video, we're going to talk about how you would leave behind a $100 million estate. All right, so I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you probably don't have a $100 million estate, but I'm also guessing that you've probably thought about, well, if I did, this is what I'd do. And I'm going to tell you what I would do if I had a $100 million estate as we go along in this video. And I'm going to encourage you in the comments below to tell us what you would do with that $100 million estate. So I was doing some research on the web, and there was a website that said that somewhere around 34,000 Americans have an estate that's equal to or greater than $100 million. That sounds like the 34,000 sounds like a pretty big number. And, you know, obviously it changes every day with market fluctuations and stock market and that kind of thing. But to go through this exercise, I'm going to put some rules on us so that we can all be kind of working at the same place. So let's say you're married, you have children. Let's say the rules for this exercise are you're really in that, as one client told me one time, he was in the fourth quarter of his life, and you're in a position where you just can't go out and spend $100 million. You're not 20 years old and have 80 years left in your life to spend it. You're maybe 65 years old, 70 years old, 75 years old. You can't and you don't want to spend it. That's not what gives you pleasure. Now, you could make in the comments below a bunch of jokes about how you would spend it. You might say, well, I'd get servants for me to cook and clean every day. I would travel the world many times over. You might even say I'd hire the finest musicians and artists to come into my home and perform. And you might even say, boy, I'd go out and buy a bunch of stuff. But the problem with buying a bunch of stuff is if you have $100 million and you go out and buy a $5 million house, you still have a $100 million estate. You just have $95 million in a $5 million house. So buying stuff doesn't really solve the problem. And I know that there are some people out there saying that, you know, really no one should ever inherit anything. So if you have that position, that's okay. So you still need to tell me what you do with your $100 million estate. And it doesn't matter how you got it. You may have worked for it. You may have built a business. You may have saved like a Warren Buffett over his lifetime and invested. You may have inherited it. You may have won the lottery. So it doesn't really matter how you got it, but you got it, and you got to figure out what to do with it. So let's kind of start, and as we go along, I'm going to tell you what I would do with it. And the beauty of this exercise is, you know, that's the beauty of estate planning, is you get to make your own rules. What might be right for you might not be right for the next guy. So you get to call the shots. There's no right or wrongs here, but let me give you some of what I do, and then you tell me in the say that the tax law should not drive every kind of financial or legal decision that you make, but you do have to be aware of tax consequences and be informed about what the tax laws are, because they may impact some decisions that you make. And quite frankly, it impacts the very first decision that I would make if I had $100 million and I was married and I had kids and I knew I couldn't spend it and knew I wasn't going to spend it. Here's what I do with it. The first thing I do, here we are at the beginning of 2021, is I'd use up my estate tax exemptions. Here we are at the beginning of 2021. The estate tax exemption is $11.7 million between me and my wife. We each have an $11.7 million exemption. So now I can either leave when I die or I can give it away right now. $23.4 million, I would give it away right now. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I predict that the estate tax exemption is going to go down. In fact, I know it's going to go down, because even if the Congress doesn't change anything, the estate tax exemption will be cut in half on January 1st, 2026. But I think it's going to be reduced even further because new administration, they say they want to raise the estate tax or reduce the estate tax exemption. So I want, between me and my wife, to be able to get that $23.4 million out of my estate now while I can, because maybe next year I can only have a $3 million exemption. So I'm going to use up that $23.4 million of two estate tax exemptions. I'm going to give it to the next generation completely tax-free. So I have 5 kids. In fact, you see their pictures from when they were young right over my right shoulder. Now they're not so young. They're all in their 20s. The oldest is 29 and the youngest is 20. So I'd have some decisions to make. If I give away $23.4 million to my 5 kids, that's $4.68 million each. So I have some decisions to make. Do I give it to them outright, or do I put it in trust for them? The decision to put it in trust, you can do either one, but the decision to put it in trust for them could be impacted by my thoughts on their ability to manage it themselves, or do I need to have it in a trust where it's managed for them? Also, what may go into that decision to put it in trust is, am I worried that they might get sued and someone would take it from them because it was in their name? Or should I put it in a trust and put restrictions on them that would allow for asset protection or lawsuit protection if they got sued in the future? I got to tell you, in my case, my kids, they're really responsible. My oldest 2 are already lawyers. My 3rd child, he's going to graduate from Tulane Law School in 4 months. My youngest 2 children, they're already in undergraduate programs with plans to go to law school. They're probably all more financially responsible than I was in my 20s. So in my case, I might just give it to them outright, because I know I could give it to them outright and I know I could put some strings on it. Not legally, but I know that I could have the kinds of conversations with them and they'd respect what I suggested that they do with it, which would be to hold on to it and invest it and let it grow so they can do something similar for their, children and grandchildren down the road. So there'd be that decision, but I know if I had $100 million, I'd use up those exemptions now for 2 reasons. 1, the exemption's going down, and 2, if I use my exemptions now and I transfer that $23.4 million out of my estate into their estates and they invest it, well, over the next couple of decades while I'm still around, that $23.4 million will grow. It may double or triple in value. So now I've taken roughly $50 million perhaps out of my estate, completely free of the 40% estate tax. Using the exemption now, it's going to go down, and future appreciation on those transferred assets will also escape estate tax when my wife and I kick the bucket. So I would do that first. What else would I do? I'm still left with $76.6 million estate. What do I do with that? I can't spend it. I mean, even if I invest it and it grows at, say, a 4% rate, that's still kicking off about $3 million a year, excuse me, to me. And so I'm still going to be stuck with that. Stuck is a nice problem to have. Stuck with that $76.6 million. Now, certainly I'm going to max out on all my annual exclusion gifts. So I would give, $15,000 between my wife and I. Would give $30,000 to kind of everybody every year. Certainly our kids, their spouses. If we have grandkids, we'd put stuff in trust for them. In addition to that, we pay for all the school and medical expenses, which we can do as long as you do that right. But even that wouldn't put a dent into that $76 million or so. So what else would I do? Well, I'd probably start giving some to charity. That's just me. And if my $76 million is growing about $3 million a year or kicking that off, I'd probably give at least a couple of $1 million a year to charities. Now, which charities would I give it to? I'd give it to mainly the local charities that have impacted my family's, lives, from schools to other charities. If I went outside my local area, I'd probably, because I really like doing for kids, I'd probably make contributions to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. A lot of my estate planning clients have done that. And so a couple of $1 million a year, I'd, make sure that went to help, people outside of my immediate family through charity. But still got $75 million. What do I do with that when I pass away? Well, I'd say when I pass away, I'd probably leave another 10 or 20% of that to charities. Now, I'm kind of stingy in my older years. I've gotten really kind of conservative and frugal, and I don't like to see wasted money. So if I gave 20% of 76.6 million or 75 million to charity, that's $15 million. So I would be very, very particular about what that money would be used for and how it could help a lot of people for, decades to come. So I do with that. And then the rest of it, if 75 million, now I've already used my estate tax exemptions. So 75 million, if 15 million went to charity, no estate tax would be paid on that 15 million because of the unlimited estate tax charitable deduction. But I'm still left with $60 million. And that I'd probably leave to my, descendants, my kids, my grandkids, if I have grandkids, and I'd have to, the first dollar would be subject to estate tax. In fact, if I left things, too much to grandkids, that would be subject to an additional generation skipping transfer tax. So of that remaining 60 million, let's say half of it went to the government, another half or $30 million went to my 5 kids and maybe grandkids at the time. I don't have any now. And so, what my hope would be is I helped the community through the various charities that I helped. I instilled things in my descendants so that, because I know if my kids screw it up, and then when they have kids, they're going to feel rotten if they got that much money from me and they weren't able to do the same thing for their kids and their grandkids in the future. So I really would instill saving and preserving and investing to make sure, all of that fortunate wealth that we supposedly have would benefit for many, many people down the road. Essentially, I want to keep people from having to be stressed and worry about, putting food on the table and putting a roof over their head. I feel like if I can give people the opportunity to do that, then that would be, really a great gift from me. So that's what I would do if I was left with a $100 million estate. I don't have a $100 million estate. I don't really plan to, but if I did, that's what I'd do with it. And so what I want you to do is in the comments below, you can make your jokes, because there's a lot of jokes about what I'd do if I had unlimited money, or you can be halfway serious about what your plans would be and how responsible you would take it if you did have a $100 million estate and you knew you weren't going to spend it and you had to make important decisions on how to leave it behind. Put all that down in the comments below. We'll have some fun with it and see where it goes from there. Also, make sure if you hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed already, we got about 12,000 subscribers. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss anything in the future. And we will see you next time.